Nigeria's inflation rate has risen to 34.80% in December, marking a 0.20% increase from November's 34.60%. This surge is largely attributed to the festive period in December, which saw a significant demand for goods and services.
The food inflation rate also saw a notable increase, rising from 39.84% in December. And this, of course, is 5.91% points higher than the rate recorded in December 2023. The National Bureau of Statistics reports that items like yam, beer, rice contributed to this increase, ultimately affecting the purchasing power of Nigerians. Joining us to unpack this further as we explore the implications of this trend on Nigeria's economy and citizens, we have this morning our guest in the studio.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Segun Sopitan. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I started the program this morning by asking or pointing out, that 34.80% December 2024, as the NBS reported, in a year where the government has its projections for inflation to be 15%, in the 2025 budget details. So, I mean, isn't this a clear sign that the Nigerian government, really wasn't serious when it was writing 15% in 2025 budget?
Well, I mean, I think they knew what they were doing. They are very serious. They're so serious that we need to take them very seriously. Because if we don't, then we might find ourselves in very murky waters in the coming months, in the coming years, really. And the reason I say this is, when I say they're serious, I'm not saying they're serious about the plans and the things that they can do to bring this inflation down, to rein it in, but they're serious about that number. You will recall, and this might appear unrelated, but it is very related. The recent reports that we're going to be rebasing our economy and rebasing our basis for inflation calculation.
Yeah.
And the information that came out is that we are now looking at 2024 as the base year for inflation. Now, if you do that, inflation numbers, the numbers for inflation will crash. You might be talking maybe 5%, maybe 10, So, in other words, at some point during this year, I think the rebasing is supposed to happen early this year. Whenever that happens, inflation numbers are just going to miraculously drop to maybe 5 or 10%. And then the government will turn around, look at us in Nigeria and say, we've done it.
But if the numbers then drop, does that reflect in the purchasing power of Nigerian citizens?
So what we are all now saying, and I want to encourage everybody that has a voice and a platform to warn against this very, I think I'll just use the word dangerous tendency that we're beginning to see from the NBS, that you do not play with data, especially national data, because if you do that, then the basis for policy formulation is completely skewed and will be in serious trouble. So having said that, the government saying inflation will go down to 15% when we can't see clear policy action and direction is funny.
Yeah.
All right.
The basic things that we need to do, addressing exchange rates, addressing the supply side of the issue, addressing the money supply side of the issue as well. So you've got production, you've got supply.
All right, we'll come back to talk about what the basic things to be done are. Let's go on a very quick break and we'll come back with the conversation shortly. Welcome back. We're looking at the inflation numbers and the reports by the NBS and what this means. And before we went on the break, Mr. Sopitan, you were speaking to us about what the NBS, the plans, especially to rebase the economy based off, starting from 2020, and what this will mean for the average Nigerian.
Okay, so for the GDP, they've chosen a base year of 2019, which is 5 years, and that's perfect. That's actually what's supposed to happen. So I don't understand why we can't just do the same for inflation. If you want to rebase your inflation, there are two things that you need to do with inflation. You need to expand the basket, the CPI basket, the components of the basket. So now I think we have about 750 items in that basket. They say they want to expand that to about 950 or 970, which is good, because that will then give us a more balanced picture. But then the base year cannot come. The closer you are with your base year, the more unrealistic your inflation numbers outcome will be in terms of measuring the actual rate of increase in prices. You have to look at over what period. So if I'm looking at increase in prices over the last 2 months, it's going to look as if, the month on month is only 2%.
Yes.
It's 0.2% month on month. Nothing has changed. And that's what we are trying to, so they must not do this. I hope they won't. I hope we find a way to stop them. sadly, with the way things tend to happen in Nigeria, I think it will happen, and then we'll just have to figure out how to get real numbers. So it's taking us back about 15 years before the time of Dr. Yemi Kale. During that period, the NBS became data. All of a sudden, was no longer a problem for those of us that are in the policy analysis space. It was just comforting to just go to the NBS website and you will see data, any type of data.
So is it safe to say that at this point is the credibility of the NBS at stake?
It's seriously under threat, and that's very, very dangerous for a country, where all of the key economic indicators that both the policymakers and investors in particular require to make decisions. All of a sudden, investors begin to look at your numbers suspiciously. Then they will take a very, very careful look at whether they want to be here or not, because they know the truth. Every investor knows that unemployment in Nigeria is not 5%. It's still trending at somewhere around 30+%. And yet your data, or official data organization is saying it's 5%. We're lying to ourselves. So if we lie about unemployment, we lie about inflation, what else are we lying about? So, it's crucial. But having said that, I think that we need to get government to begin to look at the things that they can do to actually bring these numbers down. I was listening to one of my senior colleagues, a professor at the Lagos Business School, who lectured me, and he was saying, we can get inflation down to 10% before the end of this year.
How?
All you have to do, all you have to do is take some bold, the CBN in particular needs to make some bold decisions with regards to exchange rate management. That's one. Then on the production side, a few things to ramp up production very quickly. Dealing with the issue of electricity, for example, it's not rocket science. These things can happen. So if you fix the production side, the availability of the goods that the money is chasing, and then you fix the money supply side and the exchange rate side, those three metrics can come together very quickly. And even if you don't get to 10%, you absolutely, definitely can trend down to somewhere slightly above 20% before the end of the year. Yeah, but will the CBN do that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think anybody is necessarily hoping that it happens in 1 year.
Exactly.
I mean, it would be great if it does happen in 1 year, but okay, you have 2 more years in this administration.
Let's just see a trend.
Yeah, let's see, exactly, let's see a trend.
Let's see a positive trend.
See, every quarter that it is
it's dropping significantly.
Reducing. And so, from what you've seen, I mean, they've put out 2025 budget proposal. There's a lot of questions that have been asked about the 2025 budget.
Absolutely.
But from what you have seen with their own interest and with their own plans, how possible is it that we're actually going to see a reduction without the rebasing that they're speaking of as well?
Sadly, it's extremely unlikely. What I've been saying as far as my outlook and projections for the year is that it probably won't get worse. I don't think we'll see inflation hitting 40%. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see that. I think that with all of the fundamentals that are driving inflation have settled into their, if you like, equilibrium. So where we are now is probably where we're likely to be in terms of just the balance of the economy. Now, if government can act, then we can begin to see an improvement. So at least the good news for me is that I don't think it will get significantly worse. I don't think we're going to see a bag of rice, hitting 150,000 naira per bag, for example, for 50 kg. I don't think that will happen. I think the price of petrol has peaked, and the only way for now is down, unless something dramatic happens with exchange rates. So I think the good news is we're balanced. Now, what can the government do to bring these things down? The CBN recently released a policy initiative targeting diaspora Nigerians, the non-resident Nigeria accounts, investment accounts and current accounts. Now, if that is done properly and implemented properly, it could be a game changer. It could actually attract an additional 18 to 20 billion US dollars into the official markets. Because what's happening now is that people are remitting monies home, 20 to 25 billion dollars every year, but majority of the forex liquidity does not enter the Nigerian market. They have all sorts of platforms and shadow networks where they exchange their dollars out there and the naira find its way in. So if this works, the dollars will come into the economy and it will affect exchange rates. So,
Speaking about dollars coming into the economy, let's talk about the role that the IJGBs, I just got back, the role that they play in is there any role that they play? We see a surge during the festive season. 2024 officially has marked Dirty December as a thing. And by 2025, I'm expecting that there will be an even higher surge of people coming into Lagos, Nigeria to spend Christmas. How do you perceive that this will impact inflation?
I mean, look, this is a seasonal thing. I don't see any significant impact in terms of the fundamental indicators that we need to see improvements on. It will increase tourism and whatever associated economic activity that follows that, very short, just for a very short period. So you'll see a bump up in numbers in December, and maybe the trickle effect into January, and that will be that about that. So we need something more. It's good. I think it's a good thing. I think it needs to be encouraged. I'm beginning to hear whispers, that government wants to tax that.
I saw,
I think it's also important to say that the IJGB, I don't even know if the NBS did mention, that is a reason or.
No, they did say that there was an increase attributed to an increase of demand in the festive season. Now we know that a number of Nigerians living abroad came into the country.
Yeah, but it's I think it's fair or it's important to mention that it's not necessarily because the Nigerian government did anything. Nigerians will come back home every Christmas. So it's not like we saw a government that then invested in certain level of infrastructure.
No, it's because Nigerians have created.
No, we just created a hype.
Fund for themselves.
Exactly. So when these parts of the conversation are mentioned, it's not, kudos to the government, people came back home and no, that's not it. And by the time these people leave, the Nigerians who are here that don't have anywhere to go will face the real inflation. Whatever figures that were a percentage that we're seeing, you would face that reality. And the government must take whatever steps is necessary to beat down that inflation. Absolutely. How unfair is it to the average Nigerian if the government chooses to do this rebasing thing and changes the inflation to maybe 7%? How unfair and how unrealistic would that be to the average Nigerian whose pocket goes to see the reality in the market every day?
I think what makes this particularly dangerous is that you see, to that average Nigerian, he knows the truth. The truth that he lives has not changed a bit. If anything, it's probably getting worse. And then he's hearing, no matter how educated or uneducated he might be, you hear it, either in Yoruba news or in Yoruba newspapers or Hausa news or whatever. You will hear the official numbers coming out from your government spokespeople. And so the trust deficit that I think the government is supposed to be deliberate about trying to fix, about trying to address and reduce, will just widen. And that will increase the rate of skepticism, lack of faith, cynicism. And you see, those negative emotions are unhelpful from a policy implementation standpoint, because you need the support and the goodwill of your citizens for your policies to work. We shouldn't make any bones about, we shouldn't play with the idea that how people feel about the country doesn't matter. It matters a great deal in terms of success of policy execution. Because if people don't believe you, they will sabotage you. They will not cooperate with you. So if the NBS is now saying inflation is 7%, but I went to the market last month, I bought a crate of eggs at 6,000 naira, and I've gone this month and I'm buying it at 7,500, and you're telling me that inflation is 7%, I will know you're lying. Yeah. And that becomes a problem. So everything you say, I will doubt. When you now say some good things, I will say it's a lie. And I think that government people need to understand that this is important and it's not something they should trifle with.
All right. Segun Sopitan, thank you very much for your time and for speaking with us this morning. We, of course, will see how things turn out with the Nigerian government.
I hope it's
and with
positive.
the inflation.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right.